Hi, my name's Rod Sowden and welcome to our Competent Governance course. This is the second module where we are looking at delivery. Hopefully you will have had a look at the first module about designing governance and all the issues that you need to consider. Well, during the delivery cycle of your program, it's really about making sure it's optimized and keeping the show on the road. Let's face it, this isn't going to be easy, is it? Governance in a program is always complex, particularly where it conflicts or overlaps or is challenged by the organisation's own governance. This can particularly come about due to just the sheer size of the expenditure. So what we're looking for is to get a balance between governance, control, and also we need to put assurance in there as well. And if we can keep that balance, then we can keep momentum in the program. What does good look like? It's really about having pace, making decisions at the right time, in the right place. Too much governance obviously creates cost, and too little governance means you're taking much bigger risks than you probably need to for your program. So delivery is around about balancing those risks and being optimized. It's not only precarious, it's complicated. So whenever we make a decision, we've got to think about the impact on the plan, the outcomes, risks it brings, what will happen to the benefits, what information do we need to make those decisions, what's the impact on resources, but most importantly, what's the impact on the business case. So these are the kind of areas that we think about in terms of governance, and when you've assembled it, you want consistency across the way decisions are made in the different areas. So to do this, we have to have in place effective structures. We have to have in place effective people, which is really important. I raised it in the first of the um, videos. Competent people are probably the key to everything in this. If you've got incompetent people in the structure trying to make decisions, they'll struggle to make them, or they'll just make bad ones. Now, they need to be supported by processes that allow the decisions to come to the fore and get taken when they're needed, and that we have systems below those processes that enable us to have decent quality information to feed how we make our decisions. Now, as you move through the life cycle of the program, these things are changing. Information hopefully will improve, but what does that tell us? In the early days of the program, we probably haven't got the right information because we're still working out how to get a hold of it. So we really need to think about how we keep this thing in balance, but also how we keep momentum and change as we move through the program, because we want to become optimized. Okay, let's have a think about some of the challenges you're going to face as our great new program leader. In the program manager or program director role, what is it that you're going to have to try to deal with to get you through? So we need to be aware of these very early on, because hopefully then you can design around them. And of course, as with most things, a lot of these are addressed by stakeholder engagement. So let's just have a little think about them. So we've got, first of all, we're going to have things like turf wars. Yeah, you're going to have to deal with the traditional power bases in the organization. And if you're delivering change, then without doubt, you'll be challenging people's authorities and you'll have to deal with their resistance. So stakeholders are going to be key on all this. Culture, how does this organization that you're trying to change or work within or work across work? Are they open and honest, or are they defensive? What sort of behaviors are we going to come across? Because all of these are going to affect the ability to have good governance in place. If you've got a culture of fast decisions that are undocumented, then that's going to cause a problem. If you've got behaviors of avoidance or ducking, or maybe people just making snap judgments, that could be difficult for you too. The difference between program governance and the organizational governance. How is this big new structure going to fit in? Is it working on behalf of one particular division, or are you working across divisions? And that's going to affect the design of your program board. You need to have all those organizational power bases in the program, but they need to accept that the program's making decisions that will affect their power base. Do we have a culture of avoiding accountability? Yeah. We remember doing a course where a chief exec, when he realised he was accountable in this discussion, said we've got a culture of joint accountability, which actually told me immediately we had a culture of avoiding accountability. But are people ready to stand up and make the decisions publicly? These are difficult areas to deal with. And then, of course, the person that is accountable, the sponsor or the SRO, how much time have they dedicated to this? Because if they haven't dedicated enough time, then that in itself is going to be a problem, because you won't be able to get at them. They may have the best culture and behaviors, but if they have not dedicated the time to delivering what you need in your program, then you're always going to have problems and they'll be overloaded. And of course, it may not just be their time, it may be their competence as well. Organizational maturity is an important one. High maturity organizations will have well-developed governance models, both for the organization and the way programs work, that you can draw on. Low maturity ones, you may be breaking new ground to build this thing. So you need to consider how you're going to deal with that. And again, we mentioned sponsor competencies, but we're talking about everybody within the program, everybody understanding what's going on and what decisions need to be made, and what skills and knowledge you need to have to make those decisions. So building organizational capability is critical in having effective governance. As we said in the design video, you can design the best governance model, but if the people don't have the competence to be in that model, you'll still have a very weak governance environment. Formality of meetings is another one. Some organizations do meetings, some don't. Some of them do them formally, some don't. And so as you're bringing in governance and boards, the history and culture around these areas are going to have a significant effect on what you can achieve. Okay, you've seen this slide before, but I think it's a really good one just to bring us back to a bit of reality. Um, Governance is about doing the right things. So governance is all about making sure that our program is delivering what the business needs through its projects. Yeah, and we get that direction from basically portfolio management or whoever we're working towards. But it's all about, are we going the right way? Are we going to deliver it? It's not about this is what the program wants to deliver. It's about what the organization wants from the program. The other side of that is doing things right, which is really around controls, and it's about specifying the governance, specifying how things should work, and then basically doing it that way. Now, unless you do it that way, you can't learn from your mistakes, you can't learn what's good and bad, and therefore you can't improve. But the doing the right things is a continual theme through the lifetime of the program that you absolutely need to stay on side with. Critical to governance is the concept of life cycles. So in this image that we've got in front of us is one that we put together when we had to build a portfolio model, and we wanted to integrate models like MOP, MSP, and Prince2 and APM. And you can see here that we've built a model that actually enables effective control. So you've got at the portfolio level the continual scanning for ideas and challenges and risks, and they drop down into what was called a process. Each one of these boxes is a process, by the way. Idea, where actually the idea was considered, and from there you decided how you're going to deliver it, if you were going to deliver it at all. So it could go in through the program controls and start to follow the program journey, or it could go into the project controls and follow the project journey. But as we're working at the program level, the idea would then step its way through, define the program, design it, and deliver the tranches. And if you have a look at the P3M framework, you can follow quite a detailed description of each one of those. But each one of those stages enabled us to maintain control of every program and every project within that program by having stages, and within those stages, preset milestones. If they weren't hitting the milestone, then there was something wrong. Okay, so that's how it worked. And then we had the concept of balance, and all the way along, the whole role of governance was to balance the rate of change, balance the load on the business, balance the load on the capacity of the program and project teams. But something like this in your organisation can really help improve governance because everybody knows where they are in the system when they're making that decision. And I would strongly suggest you have a look at the P3M frameworks and understand how this works. Even if you've already got a model, it will help you be better at using that model, I guarantee that. So, one of the problems that we face when we're trying to manage governance and have effective decision making is the concept of biases and how groups and people start to think in illogical ways. So, there's been plenty of research around, certainly in the UK, about the problem with optimism bias. When you really want something and you're looking at the business case, you look at it and you don't see the faults in the argument. Yeah, you kind of all want it to happen, so you don't look on the dark side, and you therefore have a natural bias in every estimate. And there's another angle on this in some ways, is that leaders want it done fast and cheap, so the people preparing the business cases produce one that's fast and cheap to keep them happy, and it could be the later generations that see the true cost of it. So optimism bias, and then we've got expectation or confirmation bias. So once you've actually got a belief that something should happen, we could look at high speed 2 in the UK, or think about, you know, the COVID and the pandemic opening up. One of those, once people get it in their heads that they want something to happen, they'll find the evidence to support it. Now, we're living in a world where social media and the press are becoming ever more soundbite orientated. And I would say one of the big lessons for me in the last couple of years is facts do not make evidence. So whenever you look at any news report, then you'll find facts, but they're used to support a bias that they think their readers have. And of course, social media groups do the same. So we always have to be aware that we're not looking for evidence to support what we want to do. Then there's the planning fallacy. Truly, planning is a dreadful business. You know, if you just look across all the projects and programs, so many of them are going wrong, and it was so obvious they got the plan wrong, but they had so much internal belief in their infallibility that they would still go for it. And they could look at other people's lessons learned, and why do they think they won't make those same mistakes? Just because they've read the document doesn't mean it's going to happen. So the planning fallacy, people always underestimate the planning, and that's why we've invested so much time in the planning modules to help you not make those mistakes. Then, of course, there's the availability bias, which rather than selecting evidence that confirms your belief, you only use the evidence that's in front of you. Now, if we think about lessons learned, you need to go looking for lessons learned to actually get a balanced view, but you may only go with the first 4 that you find on Google, all of which confirm your belief, and therefore they're beginning to help you. But the availability of information doesn't mean that it's the right information. Groupthink, I remember somebody reporting with the COVID that the UK, you know, wasn't prepared particularly well in March 2020, and listening to the ex-Secretary of State at the time said the problem was the people that were looking at the potential for pandemics were suffering from groupthink. He said, and we all believed it was going to be a flu pandemic. Nobody thought it could be a COVID pandemic. But again, the same thing, program boards do this all the time. I remember reviewing a program board where they'd been through a whole bunch of problems that was so glaringly meaning this program was going to drop back 6 to 8 months, but they still agreed that they'd still go live in 6 weeks later, even though there was no way on earth they could go live, because they just couldn't get these things done. So they had this kind of like-minded group thing going on, where they just wanted to not accept that things were not going to happen. There's a thing called framing effect, where people place higher value on losses avoided than equivalent gains. So that is actually about people being, this is where risk management, the avoidance of loss has a stronger emotion. Yeah. So you won't have to do this. It seems to have more power than you will be able to do this. So it's a kind of, this is important when you're writing business cases, about getting the terminology right. It's a big lesson in there. If you write the positives, yeah, you can actually, rather than just the avoidance, then you can actually get more leverage with the people who are reading it. Anchoring and adjustment, you see this all the time, and particularly in capital projects, where there's a tendency, the first guess is then taken as the definitive answer. Massive problem, yeah, particularly in the public sector, because then, yeah, the Treasury goes off and budgets a certain amount of money, and then gets upset if you ask for more. And you think of things like High Speed 2, Crossrail, all those big ones. All of them put the initial estimates were horribly wrong, but everybody's judging them against that initial estimate. We've got where we're based, there's a railway line due to open. There was an initial estimate put in by a consultancy of 10 million. It was wildly wrong. it's about 70 million, but all the local councillors still believe that it's gone from 10 million to 70 million. The fact was it was never 10 million, but there's the way we need to understand this, okay? Confusion in correlation and causation. This is a really interesting area where you see evidence to prove a fact when actually it's just another fact. It's not actually evidence. And I think I can personally relate a story there where I was back during the COVID period. There was a big growth in infections when kids went back to school, and you went, yeah, there you go, that's the reason the kids are back at school, there's the cause of the infections. Actually it wasn't, because the infections have been rising for about 3 or 4 weeks because they'd opened all the holiday resorts, but actually you only saw the numbers when they got back to school. So what looked like a causation was actually a correlation. Okay, I think that pretty thoroughly covers biases. And you need to be looking for that within your governance model all the time. Okay, well, thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. Hope it proves useful, and there's a lot more information in the actual course about these things, of course. So I hope you enjoy it.